Great. Well, if that clock is right, we're at about 7:02, and I guess I can call the Affordable Housing Committee meeting to order as I pull up the agenda real quick here. I moved that into here. Okay, cool. Very good. Well, I think we can start with a roll call. We'll go that way and give me a chance to get my stuff in order here.
Pete Swain.
Joe Murphy, representative to the planning board.
Brian Smith. Amy Crawford. And Brian Wagner for the planning department.
Susan Mittendorf.
And Josh Port. Awesome. So I just got the agenda up, which is good timing. So from there, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes from July 24th. Did anybody have any comments on the July 24th minutes?
I have time.
Sure.
I had just said the last meeting or whatever. I had just said at the last meeting that I was going to try to, I liked getting a little bit more detail, and I just kind of wanted to explain why I didn't have detail this time, and that was because I was having a little trouble with the interface with the town system. So by the time I got it figured out enough, I just got the basics in there so that we were covered. So I just wanted to let people know that's why this time.
Gotcha, thank you. I didn't have anything written down for these. I'm trying to remember if I had notification about these or what. Any thoughts from anybody else on the minutes?
Did I circulate any minutes?
That's what I'm trying to remember
As
if I
part of the
saw any.
packet?
I'm not entirely sure this
Because
month.
I think when I set up the agenda, I set it up as if I had the minutes, but I didn't have them yet. Amy, did you ever send me any?
Yes, I sent you I hope so, I think. Let me look.
No, so I have a message from you saying that you hadn't completed them yet and that you were having issues, and that's it. I never got a subsequent document.
Oh, and you know what, it's on my other laptop, so
Okay.
we may have to.
So we can just defer reviewing an approval to the next meeting.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay, no
I
worries.
just didn't want us to approve something that didn't exist. That would not be a good
Yes,
look.
that's why I was sort of scrambling in the middle here. I was trying to check my inbox. Like, did I see these? Because usually I'll put notes if I have something to add, but I don't always write that I had no notes if I looked and didn't find anything. So glad we got it sorted out. We can go through it next meeting along with the minutes for today. All right, so we're on to item D, correspondence and public comment. Looks like we have an attendee. If there's anything you'd want to comment, you're welcome to do so. Awesome. All right, well, along for the ride is great. Happy to have you. Thank you for coming out. Excellent. So we can move on to item E then, which is new business. And first on the list is RIPTA service cutbacks. So I do have a bit of an update on that. I don't know how in the loop everybody is, but basically about a month ago, they were holding hearings for potential cutbacks, and they were going to be pretty devastating for the town here. It was going to be basically entirely eliminating, if I remember right, the 69 route, which basically goes north to south through the town, heavily cutting back frequency on both the 66 and the 64, which are sort of on the north edge of town. And when I say heavily, it was going to be something like an 80% drop in routes on the one I typically commute on. That's between the two URI campuses. So it was going to be pretty rough. That originally did not pass the original board vote, and they decided to redo their cuts and have re-proposed less extreme cuts now. So this is as of a few days ago. The proposal is for I think it's elimination of weekend service on the 69, which is still not great for the town, but at least it's only on the weekend. Weekday frequency on the 69 would go down from hourly to every 90 minutes, and the span of service is basically being shaved off by an hour or two on either end. So it's more like 7:30 to 10 instead of 6:15 to 12:30. The 64 somehow isn't being touched, and the 66 is dropping in frequency. So I don't know if there's anything to be done this time, because I don't think they are doing any sort of new public outreach for these. Like, they had the whole set of hearings and such last time for public comment, and this time I think they're treating this as if they have taken the public comment into account for the revised changes, and so they're just voting on those actually today. So we'll hear very soon whether those are going to go through, and if they do, they would come into effect on the 27th of September. So we'll see how that goes. It seems like definitely negative for the people who depend on that in South Kingstown, but it's not as catastrophic as it was originally going to be.
Because of public outreach. At least partly because of public outreach, so that's positive.
Right. There was a pretty good showing. I was at one of the two hearings back at the end of July, and there was a good showing at that one. I saw some photos from the one here, and it seemed like there were a decent amount of people here as well. So that's all good to see. And I guess we'll see what happens this time. I think it's more likely that they'll approve these, because it seems like the governor's, I guess, less critical, but we'll see how it goes.
So, yeah, just for everybody's edification, I just passed out a copy of a letter. The EDC voted at their last meeting to send a letter to the governor about the RIPTA cuts, and it got approved by the town manager and mailed out this week.
Is the state budget short on a lot of items? Are we going to see cuts in a lot of areas, or is it limited to this, or is it the state not getting federal funding, or what's?
I'm not well versed in, the full scope of what the state's budget issues are. I know that this has been a major point of discussion over the last couple of months. RIPTA did a town-by-town open house sort of thing. I was here when they had the meeting here. The room was packed, and there were a lot of very unhappy people in the room. So it is certainly causing a stir. And there was something issued by the governor's office. I can circulate it. I got it by email from the town manager's office, saying that the governor's office was going to work to try and maintain service, but I don't know that means fully fund RIPTA either. So some changes are going to wind up being made.
Are you seeing it in other areas that impact the town?
No, not at this point.
All right. Well, I will report back if I hear anything else that might need action from us. I love that the EDC wrote a letter on this, but at this point, as far as I understand it, the vote is happening today. So if that does not go through, maybe there could be some sort of outreach that we could do, or if they have additional events, but at this point, I'm not aware of anything. You can go for it, Susan.
I just wanted to say before I left, I saw the news, there was a vote. It did happen today. They're saying there will be cuts, but they're not hoping as deep as originally. So there was no detail, but it did happen, so.
Thank you for confirming that. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. Well, very good. I think we can move on to item number 2 then, which was about the old Tower Hill Road form-based code. So my thought was that we could give just some thoughts for any people who were able to attend the form-based code workshop on, I think it was July 30. And if, in addition to that, I know that there was some public opposition to this that's been expressed as well. And so it would be good to discuss what that is and what we might be able to do to sort of advocate and, I guess, get information out there about that. So first I'll open the floor if anybody who was there on the 30th or had a chance to look after at the form-based code, proposed form-based code, if they have any thoughts about that, any things that they really liked or thought might need to be adjusted.
I have some thoughts. The thing that I came away most transformed by was my experience of like listening to all of the explanation, and it just sounds wonderful. Everything about it sounds wonderful to me, and I thought it was explained really well. The part that struck me that certainly has to do with affordable housing is when a person stood up and said, "This all sounds wonderful." He was very even-tempered and really was very, forthcoming that he had lived in the Florida Panhandle, and they went through similar sorts of revitalization of a couple of towns around him. And I don't know, he didn't use the word disappointment, but that was the implication, that he was, that what had actually ended up, the product that actually ended up was a resort town that was a lot of older people, no young families. Everything was very, very expensive, and that sort of shifted my thoughts about how we need to approach this in a way that somehow we really make sure that we maintain a diverse population of age group and income. So that was pretty important to me.
So just because I've talked to both our planning director and Jason King, who lives in Florida, are familiar with those developments in the Panhandle. And they have both said those developments were designed from the outset as high-end luxury developments. And so that's the kind of buyer that they attracted. I believe, as does Jason, that when we're talking about apartments over top of shops in the middle of downtown Wakefield, you are very likely not talking about the same market. You could go into Matunic and buy up a whole bunch of old 1950s, 60s beach houses, and there, yes, you could start from scratch and build a high-end luxury community, but I don't think you're going to do it in the middle of a commercial district like that. There was one other thing. I don't know. Maybe it'll.
And I think already, at least, like the stuff that's existing in Wakefield that has businesses with housing above it isn't in that mold. So it does give me, obviously, with even if it's not built to be upscale, with any new housing, it's going to be desirable. But at the same time, that's not a reason not to build new. Like I do appreciate the sentiment though, and I like the fact that the community is prioritizing, serving people who are, who need more the housing that's being provided. So I think that's great and something that should be kept at the forefront. But I agree. My initial takeaway was not that this seemed like something that would just turn into a tourist destination, especially not being right up on the water. But yeah.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I'm not against it at all. You know that I've been for mixed use forever, but it just raised a flag of like, let's be cautious about, let's be cognizant that could be an outcome.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between doing that in downtown Manhattan, where rich people would like to be living in those types of things, and doing it in downtown Wakefield by the neighborhood that we're looking at the map and saying, who's going to want to live there? And I don't think it's wealthy people necessarily. Even if you made them very high end, I doubt it. So, and I also it is creating walkable living space. And I just feel like that's something we always have to try to be striving for when we have that opportunity, because the people that are gonna live there could potentially be working, living above this place they work at. And I think that makes a lot more sense.
So I would like to add something at this point, because I think during the lifetime of this project, we've sat through meetings and we've heard a lot of people express a lot of support for the project. The closer a project like this becomes to being reality, the more likely the opponents are going to start stepping out. And that has happened. When Jason and Pam King were here doing their presentation, they did meet with a prominent property owner in the commercial highway district, and they were told in no uncertain terms that that person would oppose this to the end because they did not want to see any restrictions whatsoever on what they could do with their property the way they wanted to do it. So, you guys have some work cut out for you from the housing perspective of this project. The Economic Development Committee has some work cut out for itself from the economic development perspective of this project. If you want it to continue to move forward, you're going to have to make sure that the town council, who is ultimately the one who's going to have to sign off on this, hears those positive voices. And those people are going to need to be in the room when the decision is being made, because if all they get is a progression of property owners in the commercial highway district who, like this person, don't want any restrictions put on their property, then that's the way the wind will blow the council on that particular night for that particular vote. So please, all of you, if you look at this project and you support this project, even if you believe there are things in the draft ordinance that need to be tweaked, if you generally believe that a form-based code approach is a good idea for this area in terms of supporting more housing development in town, make sure you're here and make sure you talk to other people about it and ask them to be here when push comes to shove.
Brian, is that the primary objection, as you understand it, is that people are concerned that it will limit what they can do with their property? Are there other objections?
That was the primary concern. And that, of course, sort of ignores the fact that what they can do with their property already is limited by existing zoning ordinance. So they don't have ultimate freedom to do what they want. And it also seems to ignore the fact that by allowing them to go up to 3.5 stories, the value of their properties will be dramatically increased. Whether or not they bring their lots into compliance with it or not. And remember, nobody's putting a gun to their head saying you have to come out tomorrow and redevelop your property. There will be a requirement in there that if you do X amount of work on your property, the code is now triggered and you have to bring it into compliance. And in settling on what the final form-based code is going to be, I'm sure that break point is going to be a substantial part of the discussion.
Okay. So what step is it at? What stage are we at right now with it?
So what we have is a final draft from the project consultants. Since it's a zoning ordinance, it will need to go to Joe and the planning board for advisory recommendation to the council. I'm sure that the planning board will have some suggestions here and there about how the plan might be improved for the town. and then it will go to the council. And I would expect with an ordinance of this magnitude that you're probably going to see it on the agenda for a couple of meetings before they actually vote.
Right. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this a little bit is that was the conclusion I had, that basically that there might be little things that you can quibble with, but for the most part, it seems like an awesome opportunity for the town, like in terms of housing, of course, but just in general, making like a really nice, like pleasant and productive area. And so I think what I want to make sure we can do as a committee is make sure that we're aware of the dates, like when this is going to show up at the planning board, when this is going to be discussed at the town council, like really any of those things, and not only get out there ourselves, but also like reach out to our networks as well, and people who we think would be impacted by this, who would be interested in this, and get them to show up too. Like I definitely have some people who I could reach out to, through the grad school, et cetera, some friends as well. And I think I completely agree. I think that if you have some very influential and loudly negative voices, you're going to end up with a lot worse outcome than if you can have a lot of people in there supporting it. So I guess my question at this point is, am I correct that this isn't on any planning board agenda yet, and we're just sort of waiting for that, or is this already going to be discussed at a certain time?
I don't think I've seen the agenda for the upcoming meeting. We had discussed it a couple of meetings ago. We had discussed it, I think, at the last workshop meeting, but I don't think I haven't seen it on what the agenda is for the next workshop, next month.
Yeah, I have to talk to Jamie when he gets back next week. My understanding from the last conversations with the consultant is that trying to target to have this through to council by the end of the calendar year. So if it's a pretty thick code, it's something that is new to planning board members as a new form of zoning. So I think we're going to have to keep working on it to get you guys to a point where you're comfortable making that advisory recommendation, council. So I would hope that it's on the next work session.
So, maybe we should be proactive and draft a letter of support. I mean, even if it can be phrased to say, we understand that there might be changes to this as it develops, but that it's a general concept where the Affordable Housing Committee is in 100% support of it. It might be worth try to be proactive, get in front of that, and then make sure we're at meetings, et cetera, to continue to express that view. So, I'm happy to take a closer look at it and draft a very generic letter saying we're 100% behind it, if in fact we are. There's two of us missing, or well, there's one of us missing, I guess, at this point, so.
I was just going to say, should we have that, can we have that, we can't have a vote, but could we have a discussion about putting together the pieces of a letter?
No, you can have a vote. It's on the agenda for
Yeah, it's an
discussion
agenda
and
item.
possible
Oh, good.
action. So,
Okay.
yes, you can have a vote. And if somebody wants to volunteer, or two people want to get together to work on putting a letter together, that would be awesome. You could bring it back for a vote of approval on the letter at the next meeting.
Yeah, let's do that.
I would suggest that the more detail you could put in your letter as to why you support it, the better. Just, a general letter, 2 sentences saying.
No, I didn't mean that. Yeah.
That's not gonna
I
throw
just
a
didn't
lot
wanna
of
go
weight
point by
behind.
point
But
and-
get into and explain
Yeah,
about
yeah.
how the increase in the density will support housing, that bringing residences into the commercial district will create life in the district, which will in turn support the economy. It becomes a real nice circle in terms of both residential use and economic growth.
And I think everybody knows planning board meets twice a month, the second Tuesday of the month is typically a workshop where things like this are heard, and then the fourth Tuesday is projects and the regular meeting when people are presenting. So it would typically be the second Tuesday of each month.
So we should maybe tentatively plan on the 9th of September, that Tuesday, if people have the availability of trying to make it out to that meeting. And obviously we can check the agenda beforehand, but just, pencil it in. I will definitely try to be there if I can. And I agree. I love the idea of writing a letter. I think I just want to open the floor. Anybody have any thoughts about this, positive or negative, or should we just move to a vote about it?
No, I agree. We need to, express, that's why we're here. We're trying to move these projects forward. So just clarification, this letter would go to the planning board. Okay, and just,
You can send it to whoever you want. You could send it to the planning board and the council.
Yeah, we could
since-
CC the council, too, or
Yeah.
include the council as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me, yeah. I guess, does somebody want to bring a motion to do this? And maybe we can have, maybe you want to take a first swing at it, Peter, and then Amy, in your secretarial majesty, maybe you can help spruce it up at the end. Yeah.
No, that's fine. I'm fine, yeah, so we want a motion to draft a letter to be submitted to the planning board and to the town council in support of the Old Tower Road project.
I second that.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. Sounds good. We will indeed do that, and we'll plan to vote on that at the next meeting. Awesome. Any other? Oh, go for it. Yeah.
No, I just, what was the date of the
The
actual?
9th,
Yeah.
is that
The
correct?
planning
Joe?
board meeting
September
is second
9th?
Tuesday, so it should be September
September
9th.
Unless,
Yes. Yeah, the work session is on the 9th. The agenda for that meeting should be out on the 3rd or 4th next week.
All right. Any last thoughts about Old Tower Hill Road, or should we move on? Seeing no initial hands. Okay, sounds good. We can move forward then into old business. The first item here is about the missing middle housing draft ordinance. So we had discussed basically taking a look through this, seeing what thoughts we had, like things that might need to be changed, things that we think might be sensitive to the planning board, that could explain reasons that they haven't taken more action on this. I think my original thought had been that we could go through this like kind of almost like section by section and give thoughts. I think I would like first to get some initial, more general feedback about this, because I definitely had some thoughts myself going through this, and I think, at least for me, it's changing how I'm thinking about our path forward on this. But would open the floor first to see if people had general thoughts about the code or feedback, if they got a chance to look.
so I guess I would start by saying I'm not that familiar with it, and I'm curious as I was looking at it as to why it hasn't been successful at this point. Brian, why isn't this being utilized more, or
So this was a product of a previous consultant who was hired to look at different housing affordability issues in town. The same contract developed the ordinance that we currently have for cottage communities. It came up with some ideas for our inclusionary zoning ordinance, which were then subsequently made moot by changes to state law, so they never got enacted. But this was proposed. It's been brought to the planning board on a couple of occasions. It's been discussed, but no action has ever been taken on it. There has not, at least in my opinion, really been a sort of a line by line or section by section vetting of the ordinance. What do we like? What do we don't like? Why don't we like it? Can we improve it? Is it unimprovable? So there really hasn't been a conclusion. It just sort of gets discussed and then move forward to the next item on the agenda.
Any other general thoughts? If not, I did hear from Rich, so I can read what he sent to me about his general thoughts. Okay, maybe I'll start with that. So I'll just directly quote from his email. He was saying that he thinks it's a good ordinance with some changes. He did notice, or he noted some section by section below, so we can talk about that in a bit. But he was saying that overall he's not really sure how this would address sort of a middle income level relative to making the purchase of a dwelling more affordable. Building multi-unit living structures is typically associated with rentals versus ownership other than townhouses. I don't know if we can mandate things like they were done in East Providence, he thinks, where the builder built duplexes but sold them to one buyer or family where they can make the second unit a rental to help give income to afford the purchase of the overall dwelling and monthly operating costs. So he even suggests that we go back to review the original study and sort of develop either tweaks to an ordinance or a draft ordinance that could better suit that need. So those are his general thoughts. Anybody else have things to throw in or reactions to that? I know I had thoughts too. I just don't want to lead with them. I'm wary of monopolizing airtime here.
I think I would also have to look at it further. I'm not sure how it fits in with, as Rich said, it's more of a, it's not allowing people to purchase homes at certain income levels. It doesn't seem to, but maybe I need to take another look.
So the primary goal of this missing middle concept is to try and focus on infill development. Infill development on oversized pieces of property, converting larger houses that already exist. It is something that is aimed at making increases in density on sort of an organic lot by lot basis, property owner by property owner basis, without having to involve huge projects like Old Tower Hill Road, which, as great as it may be, is a big project and will take decades probably in order to flush itself out. This is something that could be happening every day on, that lot down the road that has a house that maybe could be easily subdivided into apartments, or that you could squeeze another unit on the back. We have a lot of lots in town that are narrow but very deep. You don't have the road frontage for another lot, but if laid out correctly, you may be able to accommodate another kind of dwelling on the back part of the lot. That's the kind of stuff that missing middle is aimed at accommodating. And in the more commercial areas of property, it's also aimed at trying to get to the sort of the intermediate level apartment building, the 6 to 12 units as opposed to the 2 to 4 or 2 to 6 units. So yeah, it's like I said, it's lot by lot, it's organic without having to rely on big projects to come along all the time.
Yeah, and I think I thought it was interesting, Rich's take on it. Like for me, it seems sort of intuitive that if you're if you're adding more density in area, like if you're building infill essentially, that's going to inherently be a good thing because you're serving more. Basically, with the same amount of money you're putting into the infrastructure, roughly, you're serving more people. So it's going to be more affordable, you know, just sort of like tax efficiency wise in terms of having that. But it's also putting people closer together, which I know some people don't like fundamentally, but it does make society function very well in the sense that you can have walkable areas where people, you know, they can get the things they need near their house. They don't need to rely on always, you know, taking a 15-minute car trip everywhere they go. You know, they can deal with a, you know, potentially a smaller space as opposed to having a much larger lot just dedicated to only them because that's the only thing they're allowed to do. You know, it's the whole soapbox. I don't need to get too far into it, but I thought of this less as addressing, you know, like you could think of a middle income level, like sort of the people who might be a little bit too high to be helped with like really, really low grants and such, but, you know, still struggling to afford places here. But I think of it really in terms of structure type. Like we've talked about how if you have more than basically more than a 2-unit project, it goes through the same like multi-unit process that applies up to 12, and how that can make these like projects on the smaller side, like maybe 3, 4, 6 units, just a lot more burdensome to get done. So I think all of that is reasons to do it, like even beyond getting into the question of are people building wealth through this. Like I think for me, it's good enough if they have an affordable place to live that is not going to build generational wealth. Like, you know, I'm not saying it has to or it has to not, but I still think that's a big improvement because right now people have neither. That's sort of where I'm at. I think the one thing that I'll say before I sort of pass it back is I know we had discussed last meeting basically trying to see where the pain points could be for the planning board that might indicate why they're a little reluctant to give this a little bit more airtime. And I thought it was interesting because as I was going through it, it seemed already very conscious of the pushback that could be felt from the planning board and seemed to try to address that in a lot of ways. There's an awful lot in there. Like, I guess, if you all have, I think is this linked from the agenda, Brian? I gotta, is it not? Oh, okay. So there is, let me just check my document here because I know it's been emailed out not too long ago. Yeah, you should all have an email, or at least all of you who were on the committee as of February, titled Info of Interest from Brian, and it is attached to that. It's one of a bunch of documents attached to that. So we can sort of follow along with that if we're able to get it, and I'll give you guys a second. But you'll see that there are a couple spots in the draft ordinance where there's something that it's not actually like the text of the ordinance, but it's almost like a little editorial note from the consultant about like why a certain thing was done or maybe things that could be considered. And in a couple of those, they're specifically addressing strong opinions taken by the planning board about certain things. So I know that this originally came together with a bunch of stakeholders. It was before my time here, of course, so I don't know the full process, but clearly the sentiment was polled at that time, and there was feedback about, you know, certain aspects that was taken into account, and there are things that I've heard going to planning board meetings, so it did seem very very apt, and I was struggling to think of things beyond that, especially things that would not completely gut the ordinance that would be extra appealing to the planning board. So I guess maybe for those of you who didn't have a chance to look at it for now, the things that I'm talking about with the comments, they're sort of in a gray background. So if you just honestly flip through until you see those gray blocks with the black text, you'll sort of get a sense for it.
Describe the email again?
Oh,
To the agenda?
it's yeah, February 14th, titled Info of Interest. And yeah.
Sorry, it certainly seemed that the R10 and R20 limitation would be a true limitation, and that it is highlighted. And I don't know what R zone you want to go up to make it work, but if someone's really considering doing that, I don't know that anyone, R10 and R20 is pretty restrictive as to who would be able to do it. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was sort of my take when I was reading through this. It felt that in a lot of ways it was very prescriptive about what is and isn't allowed to be built. There were 3 very specific building types that were talked about, and I think there were a couple of clauses in there that were basically talking about respecting existing setbacks, and even to the point of if there is a setback on a neighboring property, like whatever that amount is needs to be sort of mirrored in the property where you're building one of these, like in order to make sure that there's sort of a more symmetrical buffer, like, parking requirements, et cetera. That's another soapbox for me I won't get into, but it seemed like it was relatively sort of with the bumpers up, I guess, to make sure that things that could be objectionable would be left out. And again, I've heard on both sides of me thoughts of like, I wish I knew more about this in the process, et cetera. I completely agree. I'm not a professional with this as well, but these are just my takes reading it, that and I'm sure Rich as well had some other thoughts, like more specific thoughts, and I know his experience would be useful for things like that, but it seemed like, for me, they had addressed a lot of points thoughtfully to the point where it seemed like the quibbles might be a little bit more minor. Like Rich had brought up things like, a couple of spots where they were talking about specifying materials that must be used for building, and that stood out to me as well. Like, why require a certain material if there's a material developed in the future, or one that just comes into vogue that isn't explicitly in the ordinance but still looks fine and is cost effective? Like, why would that not be allowed, et cetera? But those seem like sort of smaller issues. Like, those wouldn't get in the way of passing this sort of an ordinance, and I don't think that's the reason why something like this wouldn't come up for discussion. So,
And I'm sorry, Josh,
Yeah.
the gray text is from whom?
my read of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was that this is sort of editorializing from the consultants
From
to
the
be
consultants.
like, this is sort of something you might consider, or feedback we heard.
I have to say, I can't help but point out that the development that is causing the controversy in town is exactly what they didn't want to have happen as they objected to this ordinance. I mean, that development is cookie cutter, it is crowded, it is an eyesore, and so here it is, and they're saying in this that that's what they objected to this potential solution. So,
If we're talking about Oak Street,
Yeah.
Peter, I have talked to a number of the neighbors there, and I have asked them very specifically, are you objecting to the duplexes, or are you objecting to the proposed use of those structures?
So-
And everybody has told me that it's really the use and not the duplexes that is causing all the consternation. If they had built 2 duplexes with 3 or 4 bedrooms each that were going to be rented to families as full-time residents of the town, I don't think you'd be hearing this sort of.
maybe not. I'll speak for myself personally. I knew nothing about the student rental piece. I walk that street fairly regularly on my way to church and my garden plot, et cetera. And as I watched them go up, I was more and more struck by how unappealing and ill-fitting in they were before I even knew it was going to be student rentals. So I can't say that shouldn't have happened. There probably was the right opportunity to object, et cetera. But we've gone out of our way through the Union Studio designs to create buildings that don't look like that in Wakefield Elementary and South Hill Road, and we're trying to put up buildings that have some variation and fit in with the landscape. those buildings don't meet that criteria, and they obviously didn't have to. I understand that there was changes in the state laws that allowed, state regulations that allowed those buildings to be built as they were, I get it. But it doesn't mean that we have to fall into that same trap as we're looking at other building opportunities for any kind of housing in town, honestly. I just don't think they're very nice looking and don't fit in very well. But if they're student housing, that brings up a whole nother issue that I feel like is.
And I think that gets to the point where anytime you talk about increasing density, you also need to talk about what does that increased density look like? Because
Yep.
quality architecture and design goes a
Costs money.
long way to concealing density.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't bother you so much when you walk by and go, oh, that's a nice looking house.
Right.
And at least I thought, like, if you look at the building types that are mentioned in this draft ordinance, it seems like they're very, very respectful of that. Like building things that already have precedent in the community and are prescriptive enough that it feels like you can't just go on the rails and make a whole bunch of, completely, one-dimensional and cookie-cutter things. Like they're requiring subsets. They give you a list of 12 different kind of aesthetic embellishments you can make onto the homes, and you need to basically pick at least 3 of them and mix them up such that you don't have the same exact look side by side. Like this is just the stuff that's legally specified that you would have to do. So like as a floor, you would need to be moving these things around in order to follow this ordinance. So I don't know. I thought it was pretty well crafted in that sense. So I guess it seems like we probably haven't collectively looked at this enough to really, go through it in like piece by piece in detail. I'd be happy to do that, but I feel like it would be a better discussion if we all had a chance to go through it first. I will say that, so we discussed last meeting that at least Jamie's take was that there was probably some sort of fundamental objection going on at the planning board as to why they wouldn't want to prioritize looking through this ordinance in more detail. And my take from the comments in this ordinance is that those concerns have been identified to the best of our ability and pretty well responded to. Again, as a non-expert in this, but still, just my take reading through it and having heard the things that typically come up as pain points for the planning board. So given that we have in the past attempted to get this on the agenda, and after months we succeeded and it did get on the agenda, and then there was yet another very quick discussion that did not go anywhere, my question would be, and maybe you can give some clarification, Brian, as to, if there are other avenues available to us, either in addition to reaching out to the planning board about this, or instead of reaching out to the planning board about this.
So the process for this, for any change to a zoning ordinance, is it has to go through the planning board for an advisory recommendation to the town council at some point in the process. It does not necessarily have to start in the planning board. New ordinances can start with the town council at their own initiative, in which case they would probably have legal counsel prepare it, and then it would be sent to the planning board for an advisory recommendation. Zoning ordinance changes can also be initiated by members of the public. If you look at the zoning ordinance, I think it's section 1001, spells out the process for a public request for a zoning ordinance change. And it comes into the planning director, and it gets sent to the council and the planning board simultaneously. initiating a change under that ordinance also starts a clock. The planning board has 45 days to provide an advisory recommendation to the town council, who would then vote on it. The final outcome always is the council has to vote on the change to the ordinance. So those are the options: initiated by the council, initiated by the planning board, initiated by public application. I did consult with Jay Parker, the other member of the planning board. I said, what if a board proposed the change and put in an application? If you read the ordinance, you'll see that there's an application that has to be filled out. You have to provide the ordinance change that you want. There's a fee. I said, fees would be waived, I presume? He said, yeah, I don't see why. Now, I haven't seen that happen yet, so I can't say for sure one way or the other, but it certainly would make sense that the town isn't going to bill itself to put in the request. And certainly that's one reason for boards, being here. You could also simply write a letter to the council and ask the council to bring it up on its own initiative. So different approaches, depends on how you want to proceed.
Well, I don't want to be oppositional to the planning board. I would be very curious as to have them sort of articulate why it gets bogged down. What is it that we could do in listening to the planning board that would help move this forward before we did something where we tried to do an end run around anybody? I'm not thrilled about that idea, but...
Well, I'm not sure it goes around, as they still would get to give their opinion. The only thing is they would need to give their opinion within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's what we're looking for. I mean, I don't know if you have other thoughts, Joe. We've tried.
I'll tell you, I've brought this up at many planning board meetings, and it just doesn't seem to get traction. I think there's a couple of members that's for it, I think there's a few members that's not. I don't think it's a matter of running. Joe, you guys, it's not a matter of end running. I mean, you have the ability to advise both the planning board and the town council. I've certainly made it known several times at the planning board meeting that you guys want to work with them. And like I said, I think there is some interest, but then there's some people that it just doesn't rise to the top of their priority. So I don't think it's a matter of end running it. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody wants to feel like they're making a positive change. And if it's necessary for you to go directly to the town council, I certainly wouldn't object to that. I mean, I think you should at the same time send it to the planning board as well. But at the end of the day, you're here to get something done.
And I don't see this as as creating affordable housing as much as it's just creating housing stock. It's an opportunity to get more places for people to live in the community. So I guess I wouldn't see that we have stipulations in this that would require it to be affordable housing. I just think it's a way for, again, a person or a group of people to do something that can increase the value of their property potentially and create more housing stock, which will help the housing issue.
Well,
yeah.
The truth is that from an affordable housing perspective, any of this stuff could be done right now if somebody comprehensive permit the project. However, if something like this was in place and it made it easier and encouraged people to look at this kind of development, we might pick up a few more affordable units through inclusionary zoning, which kicks in automatically at 6 units and above. I also think a lot of the types of housing you might gain from this might be small A affordable, more of a market rate affordable than a deed restricted affordable, just because of the style of housing.
Yeah, I think it would create stock that would be reasonably small A affordable, and that would be a good thing.
And I think, if my memory serves me well, we have written letters to both, both the planning board and the town council to push for this. So I only say that, but, maybe we have to up the ante just a little bit. We have talked about asking for a meeting with, I don't know how, it feels, I don't know how it would feel to just attend a meeting, just but maybe a more formal ask to have a meeting. And it could include this and anything else. I mean, we could be talking about form-based zoning too. It wouldn't have to only be Horsley Witten.
My only worry is that at this point, we're, closing in on 6 months overdue for our scheduled meeting?
I mean, not with the town
Oh,
council,
you
I
mean
mean with the planning board.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see. No, totally fair. I mean,
I don't know.
I guess maybe a path forward could be to, and I agree with you on that as well, Joe, that I don't think the intention at all would be to say, like, okay, let's just leave the planning board in the dark about this, even if it will ultimately get back to them. I like the idea of reaching out to both at the same time and saying, hey, look, we have this, one way or another, we'd like to go through with it. And if we can't get it there by asking the planning board, by asking the town council together, then I love the idea of trying to go through this other process to, basically, and especially if they could waive the fee, otherwise we'll be bake sailing or something, but, to basically put this on the clock a little bit and make sure that it gets prioritized. Because I know obviously, the town boards are busy, the council's busy, but it's still something that it feels relatively close to the finish line with the fact that we already have a draft ordinance and there was a lot of town money put into this. So it feels like, at the very least, we should try to find a conclusion for it.
So you're talking about, just to clarify, you're talking about, as the Affordable Housing Committee, kind of going through the line by line and suggesting that to the planning board?
Well, so my take, and we don't need to do it this way. I'm open to ideas, but if we wanted to try another letter, we could address one to the planning board and the council, and basically say we have this draft ordinance. We'd like to see this get looked at. It's important for these reasons. The town put the money into it, and we want to see some payoff for it. We think it would be helpful for the construction of housing in the town. Can we get this on an agenda? And if we're able to get some sort of success from that, maybe the council's able to discuss it at one of their meetings, maybe the planning board takes it up again and has a little bit more substantive conversation on it, then awesome, then that's great. My thought would be, if that doesn't end up working out though, like either we give it a try and we wait 3 months and it hasn't showed up on an agenda, or we give it a try and it shows up and immediately fizzles out again, I would propose that we try the option of basically proposing this draft ordinance as our suggestion for a zoning change through, I forget which section, but essentially the citizen request process, to say that this is our suggested change to the zoning and please consider it. And then there is a legal mandate that be reviewed within a certain amount of days, which would essentially compel them to take a look at it. So that would be my thought. Like, I don't want to go to the nuclear option right away, but I think we are many attempts into this. So I think my take would be one more good solid try and then go that way. But obviously open to thoughts from others on this.
I think that sounds good.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think traction. We need to push things forward.
So the letter would have some bullet points of what we, kind of what we want to, no, you're talking about just asking them to put it on the agenda.
Yeah. Basically
And come
just
up with an answer.
Yeah, like
Maybe we forgot that part. Yeah, you have to discuss it, but then you have to come up with an answer.
Yeah, I think
decision.
ultimately that's what we need. Yeah, not just talk about it and bat it away. Like we want to get some sort of a actual decision on this. And so I like the idea, and I think what you had said earlier, Brian, about adding detail about why it's important, add at least a
Right.
little bit to say why we think this is a useful thing for the town and why it would be a win for us. And once, if we can clarify that and then ask for them to put it on an agenda for discussion, and I guess to the council, I guess it would be ultimately to either, at the very least, to refer to the planning board for review, but ideally for them to just take a look and give, essentially give their feedback, give their blessing, give their changes they'd want to make to it, et cetera, then that would be great. Because the current state, again, it's basically, it comes up, it goes right away, and nobody is really investigating in detail, nobody's really voting. So, I will say the one other thing that I think would be good, because if we do indeed decide to do a letter, that would come up at the next meeting, and we could discuss that along with the first letter we've mentioned. I think it would be great if for next meeting, everybody had a chance to look through the ordinance, because that way we could at least be informed when deciding whether or not we want to send this, and whether or not we think there are any potential, for example, pain points that the planning board might have, or et cetera, just things that are glaring misses that should be addressed before we think this is ready for review. But it seems like at this point for this meeting, we're not ready for that. But if we already need to wait a meeting to get, something else voted on, then it would be a good thing to do this month.
So Brian, typically on a application of any type, when the applicant submits it, the clock starts once you verify it as complete. But then the applicant has the opportunity to ask for an extension or agree to an extension, right? So even if they submitted it as a private party, or using that process, and it was a mandatory 45 or 90 days, it would really just kind of force the issue. I mean, you would have the ability to say, we'll grant a month extension or a 2-month extension if we are actively working on this. Is that correct, Brian, or?
With the time limits we have on development applications from the state, it sets the time limit, and then it also says, or as agreed to by the applicant. That second statement does not exist in our zoning ordinance when it comes to requests for changes to the zoning ordinance. That being said, I don't think that if an applicant was pressuring somebody to stick within the time limits, that it would run the course anyway, unless the council decided they wanted to see it and your 45 days is up. I don't know. But in my experience, if there's a time limit and the person who initiated the process agrees to an extension of the time limit, you go with that.
Awesome. So if it works for everybody else, maybe we can plan to, and I'd be happy to give a shot at it. We can put together sort of a last chance letter to both the planning board and the council, trying to get it on the agenda for one or the other. And if we're not seeing any motion on that, I'd say before the end of the year at the latest, but within a couple of months, then we can take the other option and just submit the proposal directly and put it on the clock, so to speak. And again, if it ends up being a little bit of a, if it ends up being a little bit of a, okay, take another month as long as you're working on it, at least it's getting worked on. The status quo is years of not much happening. So yeah, I don't want to let it sit indefinitely here. So I guess maybe somebody can move for this, but again, I'm happy to give a first shot at this, and maybe as well you can give a final polish, Amy, if it works for you, and or at least final thoughts, and we can have both of those, the one previously discussed and this, ready for the next meeting, and get those sent off.
I'll make a motion that Josh draft a letter
Second.
The planning board and town council.
Second.
Awesome. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Awesome. Very good. Well, I will do that, and we will discuss next meeting. It would be lovely if everyone could take a look at the thing in detail before then, just to make sure that we feel we're all on the right track with this. But
I'm just saying, not that I was unfamiliar with it, but I need to understand the details.
no,
I know
absolutely.
where we are with
I am not throwing the slightest bit of shade here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Very good. Okay, so we can, I think unless anybody's any other thoughts, we can move forward then to the other item of old business, which is the South Road School Affordable Housing Plan. So, yeah, what do we have here? Oh, it looks like I probably should have noticed. Oh no, there are two form-based codes. I was like, why is there a link to this in different places?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It may be a cut and paste mistake on
That's
my
okay.
part in putting the agenda.
No worries, no worries. Very good. Well, at any rate, what do I have on my notes on this? Right. So my understanding is that we were sort of in a holding pattern on this, pending a little bit of work done through a site readiness grant to get better estimates. Is there anything, I guess, any detail you can fill in on that, Brian, or anything new about South Road School?
So I did I attach a copy of that grant award letter? Okay. Yeah, so, we have gotten a grant award. It's supposed to be dedicated to all three sites, but one of the things that we have been asked to do by the State Secretary of Housing, and the town council has also shown the same inclination, is prior to going out with any sort of request for proposals or request for qualifications, to try and develop more information about the costs of developing the site, particularly infrastructure costs, sewer, water, roads, so that when we do ask developers to weigh in, they have more accurate information to weigh in on. I mean, the cost of running sewers either from north on South Road down or from Curtis Corner up is a very large financial question mark when it comes to penciling out how a project works economically. And as I think Jamie has been trying to make a point of, how those costs get absorbed in the project are going to directly impact how much of the housing in the project can be affordable and the extent to which it can be affordable, whether it's 80% of the area median income or 120% of the area median income. So the more information we can develop before we ask people to weigh in, the better. So that's where we're headed right now. We're trying to get some engineering consultants on board to provide that information. I apologize for not having more information for you on that, but Jamie's been out this week, so I haven't had a chance to grab his ear and say, where exactly are we at this second?
Yeah, I appreciate the update. I guess my thought as well on this is I just want to make sure that if there is a opportunity for advocacy or anything that we can help work on, that we're not missing it. So like if there's anything that comes across your desk, like please let us know. But other than that, it makes sense. I like the idea of giving that additional certainty, if especially since we have the money to do it, like give that additional certainty to potential applicants and hopefully get better proposals back and have a more successful project. So we'll see how that all goes. All right. Any other thoughts on this, or should we slide forward? seems like we can move ahead. Good clip tonight for a change. So any staff updates from you, Brian? Anything to add in section G?
Just a couple of things you might be interested in. The two proposed apartment buildings at South County Commons are in for final plan review. So with any luck, those will be turned around in the next couple of weeks, and then they'll be ready to go. I don't know what their timetable is for construction, but they seem anxious to get their approvals and start moving forward. The other thing is, if you remember a while back, we had a pre-application for Fairgrounds Road around the old Schneider Electric, putting in 6 apartment buildings over there. That applicant sort of moved off into the background, but they have been back in contact about the first formal stage of application for that project. So, optimistically, that's another potential source of affordable units in the future. And they were talking, at pre-application, everything is very optimistic. But I think their original proposal was up around 360 units, and if my math is correct, it was 70 to 80 affordable units out of that. Now, when the rubber hits the road and you have to start doing actual engineering, you may expect that to reduce a little bit, but it's still a nice opportunity for housing.
Well, it'd be great to find a viable way to get from there to the train station easily, but there isn't, I don't know what that would look like, some sort of an overpass kind of walkway or something, but.
Yeah, I've been told that that would require an approval from Amtrak.
I'm saying it would be great, but probably
They
not
more
likely.
move at a dinosaur's pace. What I can say is that DOT has a Route 138 renewal project that's going to be coming online. At the end of that, they will be replacing the bridges over the railroad tracks in Kingston. And one of the things that we have pressed them for is wider sidewalks for pedestrian ingress and egress to the train station, possibly even a stairway down from the overpass to allow quicker access to the train station. So, and that's twofold, not only because of this housing development, but we also have that very large vacant lot on the north side of 138, which, with all of the interest in transit-oriented development, all of a sudden becomes a very interesting site for something like that.
Yep.
When you say "we," Brian, who has a big vacant lot?
There is a privately owned,
Privately owned?
if you go over the railroad bridge and turn right
Yep.
and drive, it's most recently been used for agriculture, so it looks like an agricultural field. It is zoned industrial,
Right.
so it could be a factory.
So it's between the road and the railroad tracks, basically, as you
Yeah.
go over the bridge, turn right. So
It's
you
on
wouldn't
the
want to
right.
put housing there, I don't think.
Right,
It would
right.
be, the train would be very loud.
Well, I mean, no, they can
But
build to that standard, to soundproofing.
Sound-
I mean,
Windows
yeah,
and
they,
stuff.
Yeah.
they do it all the time.
But it's zoned commercial, right?
It's zoned industrial.
Industrial.
So actually, housing would, so I assume neighbors are not going to be enthralled with having a big housing complex there. But right now, it's zoned for manufacturing. You could have somebody come in and build a widget factory there.
Yeah.
And it would be by right.
There has been a couple of years ago, there was some proposals for that, development of that. That's in the future sewer district. So when it's in a future sewer district, they have to either attach it to the sewers, or they have to do a sewer feasibility and show that it's not feasible to hook up. The town's position at the time was that if that is developed, sewers have to be extended to that, and the applicant didn't go forward. The applicant did not want to put sewers to it, so.
Yeah, so that'd be a task.
Can I ask a question about the apartments in the Commons? Is that, like, what's the time frame? You're saying it's like in,
So, I don't know, I mean, legally, once their plan is approved and recorded in the tax assessor's office, they can wait as long as they want to put shovels in the ground.
okay, so,
Once it's approved, they have a year to record. Sometimes people don't record because of changes in tax values to
Yeah.
properties. That's more common with subdivisions, though, where one big lot is taxed a lot less than the sum of the multiple lots that it becomes, so people sit on subdivisions sometimes for quite a while. But this group that owns South County Commons, a couple of years ago proposed an apartment building down by the hotel across from the courthouse. This is sort of a relocation of that project, because that was having some hurdles for them that were very difficult to get over. So I do think that they are anxious and interested in getting on top of this. I mean, right now they have, one of the apartment buildings is going on a vacant building lot that's just doing nothing, and the other is going in a unused section of parking lot. So with the housing market the way it is, it's difficult for me to see why they would sit on it.
Just move forward.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the update. We have a section for recurring discussion topics. I almost wish this was under I, because I had a couple of things that I would like to go to in I, but are there any things in section H for recurring discussion topics that?
Normally, those things are for like long-running issues that come up every meeting.
Yeah.
I'll put them there, and we don't currently have any of those things, so.
Actually, isn't that what we discussed the whole meeting practically?
Yeah, I mean,
When it comes
you're
right
not
down
wrong.
to
You're not wrong.
Those were reoccurring discussions.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I think then we can probably safely move to I. So there were a couple of things. So I guess maybe Peter, you can bring up what you had mentioned via email about the change.org petition, et cetera, and we can have a bit of a discussion on that today.
So Jay Wedgemont called me this morning, or this lunchtime, whatever, and passed on information to me that there was a change.org petition circulating that was objecting to selling the Wakefield Elementary School property. And I looked at the petition. It's fairly vague, actually, and I think the basic premise is just opposing the sale of it by the town so that it has no potential other further town use, which I think is potentially a valid concern and one to be talked about maybe as we continue to move forward with how that, if we build affordable housing there, does the town give up that property? That's a worthwhile discussion. I would say it appeared as though their other objection was increasing green space by taking down the school and making that an extension of Saugatucket Park. Also a worthy discussion, but I think there are probably some ways to enhance the park and by, say, rebuilding the playground, adding maybe some other recreational features, extending a bike path that goes to meet the bike path that currently exists, that wouldn't restrict how we put up affordable housing on that. But that's, so anyway, it turns out there are actually two petitions being circulated by change.org around that. And I felt like it was worth bringing that up to recognize that there definitely is sentiment in the community that's concerned about doing that. And so it may be worthwhile for us to put it on the agenda for the next time, just to briefly discuss how we might want to respond to that. It's hard to know when you see those change.org petitions how much the people have really been following what's been happening around those issues. So how aware are they? Have they been attending the Union Studio and the town council meetings? Are they aware of what those designs look like? Are they aware that there's some effort within those designs to maintain those spaces? It's not, those designs obviously don't expand particularly the amount of park, only a little bit along the edge, but I hope that those people are aware of what we've done, and it might be worth responding to say, we agree with some of their concerns, but here's why we feel like we would like to move forward with the general plan as been suggested. I don't know. Anyway, people might want to check out those petitions, and we can put it on the agenda for next month.
That's really good to know. And that actually sort of throws me back to letter H, because the one thing I did think that was recurring that is worthy of being continuing to recur is public education.
Yeah, and we have not moved forward with that.
Right.
You know, Joy and I had some discussion about it to the extent of saying all 5 members of the town council have been very clearly expressing their concern about having affordable housing. They ran on that as a topic, and so were elected, I would say, by the majority of people in the town to continue to move affordable housing forward. And to me, the Wakefield site, again, it presents an opportunity to bring the workforce into the center of town where they actually work. Walkable, easy to get to their jobs, not having to have a car, et cetera. And that makes it even more attractive as affordable housing than it would be otherwise. And certainly Oliver Watson and to a lesser extent, but still South Road don't have that benefit. But, so anyway, you can go to change.org and look up the petitions and look at them, and it might be worth doing, and then have that as an agenda topic briefly for next meeting.
Yeah, I think one of the things I'm curious about, because I don't have social media, so I don't know how it's going out there, but I think you had said that this was also being shared around on Facebook. I'm curious, like...
I think Brian...
Oh, did you say that, Brian?
Actually,
Yeah, I'm just curious, like, what the discourse is around it. Like, is it... I'm trying to get a sense for, are people more worried about, like, fears that the park might go away, or is it more like skepticism about housing in general, or is it more actual concerns about like town finances and ownership of the land long term, and like just worry about lack of control? Like I of course it'd be good to hear from like, you know, the people themselves, but I'm curious what's been said.
I think I've heard a number of things. I think some people just don't want to see it developed. They would prefer to see it added on to the park. I can tell you, at least from my informal discussions with people in Parks and Rec, is that they are not looking for additional places to take care of. They are, their staff is overworked already. Some people seem to think that, you know, that this is a unique piece of property and they don't want to see it given away to a developer. I would agree. I wouldn't want to see it given away to anybody unless transferring title solves an important town problem. That being said, just because it's being considered for housing doesn't mean that ownership of the property necessarily needs to be transferred out of the town hands. There are developers who will build and sell houses on property that somebody else owns. Women's Development Corporation, they primarily deal in rentals, but they build on other people's property. Habitat for Humanity, they deal in for sale units. Now, normally they do build on property that they own, but they might also be interested in doing it. And there are other nonprofits and for-profit developers out alike that will engage in different ownership building arrangements. So sale is not necessarily a foregone conclusion. It is one option, and no decisions have been made. And I don't want to say that there are people out there that just don't want housing there, but I'm assuming that there are some of those as well. Comments that I have seen even suggested that this was a completely inappropriate place for housing, which makes me scratch my head because it's on a bus route and a bike path. It's right in the middle of town where you can walk to a lot of the things you need for your everyday life. Seems to me it's a perfect place for some level of housing, particularly for people who might be interested in living without a car. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. I like the idea of continuing the discussion about how to try to, just how to advocate and how to educate about this. It almost makes me want to go into those spaces and say, please show up to one of our meetings and we'll talk to you and hear what you're worried about and try to provide more information about the project, Like it's, not that we're the ultimate arbiter of the information, but at the same time, I think a lot of times when people are opposed to things like this, it comes from a place of, I don't say this to belittle the point at all, but it comes from a place of fear, of worry that it's not going to go well for one reason or another. Maybe it's going to lower my land value, maybe traffic's going to be bad, maybe it's going to cause crime to go up, what's going to happen?
Uncertainty.
It's uncertainty. Yeah. And so I think giving some information is a good place to start. But yeah, it's all the question of what's the best forum for that? How do we best reach people?
That is
Yeah.
the key,
Yeah.
really. I think, I've heard lots of different people express what they think that area should be because of its proximity. Everything from, what did I hear, where you would go for concerts or, really more parks but I think that, I don't know how to educate everyone, but we can somehow reach people. They don't understand what we're talking about when we say affordable housing, I think. Yeah. It's a perception that we're building places for homeless people. And, I try to say, because I'm on the board of Habitat, these are people that, pay mortgages, they have jobs, but they just can't afford to live in this town. So that's always my speech.
And just to throw a word in there that I think is important when we're talking about education and advocacy, I think it's going to be persistence. I think, people just, you hear something once and it's gone. You hear something twice and maybe it's still gone, but you got to keep coming back to it. And I think somehow if we could come up with a regular, consistent message that way, even if it repeated itself, and I don't know how we do that.
I don't know, I think the comments I've heard or the feeling I've seen, and we've had this discussion in the planning board as well with the members, it's not necessarily, at least with that audience, it's not necessarily a lack of education. I mean, everybody understands the need for affordable housing, and I think that they are okay with the affordable housing and all of the building and the South Road, but there's also a feeling that the Wakefield and that park is kind of sacred to the town, that is the centerpiece, and that You know, good communities are built around good parks, you know, I mean, New York has Central Park and Boston Commons, and it's a place where you can relax, it's a place where you can have recreation, it's a place where you can bring the community together. And I think, at least, I know, and I'm a supporter of affordable housing, but at the same time, I would like to see that more of an area where the whole community comes together and it stay as a park and extend the park so that we can use it for additional things. I mean, right now we have pockets of parks, you know, and we have Old Mountain Field, which is the big one, and we do the fireworks there, but at the same time, that's kind of, you know, a sports recreation versus bringing the community together. So anyways, and I know this is just, that's a personal opinion, but yeah, I would like to see it remain as a park and be strengthened as a community center.
And do you think the objections on those grounds are basically people who are expecting the park to be basically shrunk or infringed on, or like, you know, because if I'm thinking about it, yeah.
The existing park's going to be shrunk, but that the opportunity to extend the park and make it even a more sacred place will be lost, right? So,
I see.
and I know my personal feeling, you know, once you build it, you never get back, right? You're never going to get that back. The park should be, it's almost timeless, you know, it's, you extend that, you have that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now. Once you build on that, it's gone. And you know, I actually made a comment at the planning board, because I'm for the other two and not for that one. Again, it's a personal opinion, but you know, my feeling was, hey, you give away the Oliver, you know, it's an arm. You give away the South Road, that's a leg. But you give away the park, you're talking about tearing the heart out of your chest. And you know, how could a community survive when you start tearing the heart out of the chest? So,
I'll point out something that was brought up by one of the members of the Historic District Commission, though, is that that property has had a large institutional structure on it for over a century, and that the park was carved out of the school. The school was not carved out of the park. The park is a much newer use for that property than the institutional use of having a large structure there. And whether that structure is a school or an apartment building, you know, may not be a huge distinction. But I think people don't necessarily understand the history of the property the way it has been.
I feel like that impacts my feeling about it so much. I mean, I still look at the vision of the town and what it can be, and opening up the whole river, in the front of the river and walkways along the river, having a greenway there, and that area being a big piece of it. So,
I don't disagree with that, but I think there would be a way where we could enhance the recreational use of that and still maintain a building presence that strikes a compromise between those two. I think that the affordable housing units could be put up, even as they are in the Union Studios plan, they're not impacting the water at all. In fact, I think we could really, at the same time, as they've started to, really enhance the water portion of that. We could go back to having boating like they used to have off of one end of the park, but that was far from where the school was. And I think that would be a really interesting way to look at it. Let's build some recreational opportunities that access the best part of that park, which is the water, which we can't do now. And that used to be the heart of that park, was the ability to go boating along the river. I don't know if we could ever get back to that point, but that's, to me, how that park could best shine, is to utilize the river in some fashion. I would.
Yeah, just come up and sit down, and identify yourself for the meeting. You can either talk at that microphone or sit down.
I feel like we're all sitting, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Hello? So I'm just a I live on Northup Street. So you said you wanted to talk about people that had some
Can I
concern.
just have your name, because I have to,
Oh, all right.
somebody has to account for
Morgan.
this in the minutes.
Morgan Parker. So I live on Northup Street, and these are some of the concerns that I have. I attended the planning with Union Street, and then also spoke at the town council meeting to kind of just bring this up. And some of these concerns that I voiced were, I think you made the point that like contextually it would be appropriate location in town. I would use the same point to say that contextually, I don't know if it makes sense in that location for additional reasons. One would be just the density of what was proposed was extremely high. And while the footprint would kind of exist on the same school footprint, you gotta go up to get that level of density. That's a concern for me, but also for the neighbors as well. The other concern is, you have X amount of units, so you need to have Y amount of parking to support that. That's a big footprint. And the property as it stands right now, I think is an infrastructural asset to the community. 4th of July parade, Memorial Day parade, River Fire, Ladies Night, concerts. You have a baked-in 70 to 80 unit parking that's about as user-friendly as it gets. And you could have a very highly attended event directly in town and not feel the ramifications of people parking in people's front lawns or up the street. It's there, and it's just plug and play. And then another concern was obviously like, once you give it away, you never get it back. And that's a nice thing to have for the town in your back pocket for future use. Or like, maybe situation changes. Like we're trying to bring in a higher level of density of settlement into the town that's gonna facilitate eventually, like hopefully a higher school population. All right, do you have the infrastructure, the elementary, middle school to support that? Do I think that Wakefield Elementary School is ever gonna be a school again? Probably not, but like, that's a great option to have in case you need it. Especially in the future. So, those you asked, I wonder what some concerns would be with people that are not on board with a housing project in that location. Those would be my concerns. And I mean, to his point as well, you're right in town. It's a beautiful park, and like to supplement the parking side of it, right? So like you have the hotel that's going to go in at Sheldon's, so you're already going to consume some of that parking, I would assume, on that side of the river. So you've already lost a little bit of parking there. But to go access those events and park and then walk across a bridge over the river right into town is like, what a wonderful thing.
Yeah, well, appreciate your thoughts. Yeah, sorry, you can go for it, Amy.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask just a little bit more specifically. One of the things that you mentioned was the height. And what about that? Do you feel like it's like an aesthetic sort of concern?
In my opinion, the kind of scale of the proposal doesn't fit in the neighborhood. There's the aesthetic concern, but also, I mean, like, if the level of traffic that a building of that density would support would immediately cause problems on High Street, going down to Main Street. That stop sign there backs up consistently. Sunday morning when church lets out, there's already a backup there. So then you put, that level of people there going to work and kind of operating on a regular schedule. And, you know, the school was there, so there was that traffic, but like, you had kind of defined moments when that traffic was, we could call it intense, and then that was it. Whereas you put a 60-plus unit apartment building there, you're gonna have heavier traffic times, but you're also gonna have a higher volume of consistent traffic throughout the day at all hours. So I think that kind of is, yeah, I think contextually, it's maybe a little over the top for what the neighborhood is.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about, because it makes me think about some of the reactions I had to the proposal. So hypothetically, let's say you take the current proposal and you say, we're going to really target this towards people who want to live car-free. Like we're going to leverage people who maybe they're going up the bike path, maybe they're working in Wakefield and they're living and just walking over, or maybe they're using that bus route that's going right by. You know, if you could build let's say you're housing the same amount of people there as would currently be proposed, but you would intentionally be not basically burdening the road with that level of parking and that, or excuse me, not that level of parking, that level of traffic that you would expect from that amount of people, would that make you feel better about it? Or is it still, you know, your worry would be even with regard to, for example, events, et cetera, that if you're going to have maybe more of a car-light, car-free sort of focused development, that parking still wouldn't be available and that would still be a downside?
I would say like a twofold concern there. Like one, how would you stipulate that the people that live in a resident like that, I don't think you can stipulate that they don't have cars. I think, you know, public transportation is fundamentally important. I could be very wrong, but I don't see a substantial percentage of people living, working, and walking to work in downtown Wakefield. I could be wrong, and I mean, I think there probably are options to support that, but a 60-plus unit apartment building in downtown Wakefield, the majority of those people are gonna park and they're gonna go drive to work, because there's not that many jobs in Wakefield. But also, again, to your other point, the parking thing as well, like, it's kind of a twofold thing.
And I'll just say one more thing, hoping to, you know, just allay some of your thoughts, your fears, is that nothing would be done without parking, without traffic studies. That is an absolute part of the whole process. We don't have anything to do with that, but that's something before anything does get approved, that they really do that. There was one other thought I wanted to say, can't remember. No, it's gone. It's gone.
I mean, I think a study is certainly important, but if you're putting that much more people in that amount of space, there's gonna be some congestion there. That's
Right, but it's definitely increased the amount of traffic, right?
for sure.
Yeah, it's just a matter of like how much does it, whether it sort of falls within the guidelines or not. The other thing that I did just remember is one of the main things, one of the main employers is the hospital, which is right down the street. And that is definitely, the hospital has literally reached out to the town to say, we need housing for our employees. So that would be
Yep.
some of the major residents.
Is there a bus route that would access Main Street to the hospital?
The hospital, I think, the bus goes down sort of Main Street in Wakefield, so it'd be maybe like a 10-minute walk or so.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not saying there wouldn't be any cars.
no, for sure,
but-
for sure. I just, my concern is that there's too heavy a placement being laid upon the ability for people to walk to work, because, I mean, it's cold January through March. I'm like, if you got the option, I'm not walking. And most people, in my opinion, who are gonna drive.
That's something to think about.
It's sort of this interesting catch-22 where if you take, imagine your sliding scale between, like, you know, think like a downtown Manhattan area and like a farmland, you know, and like the more people you get close together, the less need there is for having parking, having people driving everywhere, the more you can access just by walking around or good transit. But, you know, of course, on the other end of things, there's not even, you get so far, there's not even parking pressure, but it's still, the main issue is just like expense of, you know, infrastructure for a really small amount of people. It's tricky because if the current sort of status is, it's a very heavily, it's an area that is very heavily car-centric in the sense that, you know, 90+% of people are taking their trips by car. And if you look at the vision, for example, for the old Tower Hill Road district, et cetera, I'm pretty sure their projections still only had a reduction into maybe it was like high 80% of people who would be driving. So it's like still very heavily going to be car-centric, and I definitely acknowledge, like, you're going to have a lot of people in these developments who are going to be driving one way or another. Even if they're walking to work, they're driving other places, right? So I completely get it. But if the goal is, you know, think having that beautiful walkable downtown that a lot of people seem to want. It's just like, how do we get there? You know, you can't do it with one building, but ultimately that built environment is going to look a lot more like, think those, honestly, just what downtown Wakefield is now, and like those cute sort of New England, almost like brick downtown sections where you have things that are sort of a little bit more built up, not egregiously so, maybe it's 2 stories, maybe it's 3, but you're putting the businesses and the people closer together. That's really the only way that you ultimately get out of that pattern. And it's tough, because I agree, like in the meantime, you're still gonna have extremely heavy drivership, and a lot of people love that and wanna keep going with that, and that's totally valid. But if the thought is to try to build that space, you know, you have to start somewhere, right? And so I think you could argue, you know, why this property, why not somewhere else? Like, when I'm looking at this whole corridor, I see it's sort of like a more, I don't know, like a more cohesive vision for all of it, where you have almost like the things that people really love about downtown Wakefield and just more of it, where you have those spaces where you can gather, and you'll see the huge lines outside of Brickley's and wherever else, like just, you know, you mentioned, you know, River Fire, et cetera, or tons of people are gathering around that because they're, you know, it's the place to be. Tons of businesses, super walkable, foot traffic, friendly space. And I think people would generally respond to having more of that. It's just trying to balance, you know, the long-term viability of the town in the sense of allowing people to be able to stay here and trying to construct spaces people want to build or live in, with those very valid concerns about having having access to the things that you really like, right? Like, I think especially for people who are going to have to, you know, think maybe they're on a farther edge of town and they still enjoy those same amenities. And it's not even a question of, oh, it's a cold day, I got to walk. It's like, no. Like, I'm driving because it's my only option, right? Like, there's going to be that need there too. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because it's a super valid concern. We're just trying to do the best we can to meet a valid need while also trying to accommodate people as much as we can. Yeah.
I was going to try to also sort of on that same point, just again, Morgan, to say really thank you. We want to hear the concerns, and you're also going to hear from us how we can sort of manage those concerns while we're addressing something that's just a huge concern here and and across the country, that, you know, affordable housing is just, we've got, you know, it's just, we're at a critical point where people can't afford to live. So if you hear us sort of saying, you know, well, we'll do the traffic study, and I thought, when we were talking about the hospital, okay, so maybe that's more than a mile, so maybe the hospital can do a shuttle. So we're gonna think problem-solving around that, problem-solving and wanting to accommodate the concerns of the people who live there, while still making sure that we address a critical problem for the town. So I don't want you to feel like we're like pushing back, but we think sort of, we just have to think more problem-solving rather than stepping back and away from it, of like, okay, well, how can we make it work in a way that makes people feel good about where they live, you know? Yeah, I mean, yeah, North of Street's a great street.
I mean, I think you can make people feel good about where they live by not putting a apartment building on that property.
Right.
Because I feel like that property can serve additional useful functions for the town, and that's not because I support the initiative. I don't think it makes sense in that location. And I think there are other low-cost options that could probably be done with the property to kind of like cover the cost, and still have all those additional like supportive features. So, just my 2 cents.
Thanks.
Yep.
No. We're very near the end of the agenda and right at the part where we're trying to figure out how to talk to people about their concerns. So thank you for coming in and having the discussion. I think for me it's helpful too, because again, like I don't always get to hear, like I'll show up at some of these meetings, of course, and hear people give their opinions there, but you know, I'm not hearing all 600 plus people who are signing these petitions, right? So it's great hearing from more people directly, like about what their concerns are. So thanks. Yeah, I guess let me take another look at the agenda here. So we've sort of been weaving between H and I. I think I don't think there's anything else that I absolutely desperately needed to get into the agenda here. I think the one thing that I wanted to call out, so I'm not going to be here for the next meeting in September, and I also, as a result of unexpectedly needing to TA this semester, am not going to be available at the next meeting of basically URI with South Kingstown and Narragansett, et cetera. If that would still work for you, Peter, to take over that,
Great.
that would be lovely. I can, get you on that email chain, and that'll be awesome. But I just won't be able to attend that and give any updates. But
You should probably mention
Yes.
what that meeting is and when and where.
yes, okay. So that meeting is, I think it is on the 11th at 11 a.m. somewhere on URI campus. I can take a look. I believe so. Yes, I'm gonna take a look here. Yes. Oh no, it's 10 a.m. Sorry. It's. Oh, do you have it?
Is that it?
That I think is for the October. Yeah, that's for October. Yeah, this. Hang on, I have it here. 1 second. Yeah.
Are
It's
those the quarterly meetings they've been doing in Green Hall?
Yes, it's in
the
Green Hall.
President's conference room.
Exactly. You got it. You got it. So yeah, it's Thursday, the 11th of September, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So originally was planning to go there, but now I have to be teaching a lab section during that hour. So I appreciate if you could show up for that as well.
Yep.
But I'll give you all the information. So
Okay.
life is
No.
good.
Yep, no problem.
Great. So other than that,
And you're not going to be at the meeting, at the
correct.
affordable housing meeting?
Right, I will be in California actually. So I think Rich said that he will be back, so he will be able to lead the meeting. But yeah, I won't see you all until October, or I guess probably honestly on the 9th. But other than that, anybody have any other topics for new discussion here? We're getting close to 9, but a couple minutes.
I'm good.
Okay, well, I think then that'll bring us to item J, which is adjournment. So we'll just need a motion and a second, and we can get out of here. All right, and all in favor? I am in favor. Excellent. Out of here. Thanks, guys.
Right, and it's what time?
Oh yeah, we are at 8:58.